Module 1, Introduction, the Greeks. Lecture 1C, Philosophy through Socrates. The Greeks. The earliest Greek philosophers were concerned with questions of the nature of reality. They believed that ultimate answers will not come from Greek myths about the gods and heroes, the great narratives of Homer. Rather, human reason can lead to ultimate truths. The first known pre-Socratic philosopher was Thales, who declared that water was the basis of everything. Anaximander taught there was a primordial stuff called aperon, which became differentiated into hot and cold, moist and dry. Anaximenes said air was the fundamental stuff. Pythagoras, impressed by the harmonies of the universe, said that numbers were the fundamental source of everything. Leucippus and his student Democritus taught that everything is made of atoms. Empedocles taught that there are four fundamental elements: earth, air, fire, and water, which interact through love and strife. All of these philosophers agreed that there were some fundamental substance underlying all of reality. Pre-Socratic philosophers focused on what we call metaphysics, an interpretation of reality. We will focus on two pre-Socratic philosophers, Heraclitus and Parmenides. Two pre-Socratic philosophers introduced some ideas that will become important for our purposes. Do we live in a world of change and transformation, or is change an illusion? Heraclitus, around 500 before the Common Era, taught that the world is constantly in flux. He famously taught, you cannot step into the same river twice. Every time you step into the river, it is new water, the shape of the river may change, and you yourself are a slightly different person. Notice that Heraclitus learns the truth through his senses by looking out into the world. Parmenides, born 515 before the Common Era, taught that change is an illusion. He assumed that something cannot come from nothing. Change means the creation of something new which did not exist before. Therefore, something comes from nothing. And he said, what is, what is not, is not. Notice that Parmenides learns truth through using his mind without looking into the world. Later, Zeno of Elea, 490 to 430 before the Common Era, a follower of Parmenides, would develop a series of paradoxes to prove that change is an illusion. The view that knowledge comes through our senses is called empiricism. The view that knowledge comes through our mind is called rationalism. The debate between empiricism and rationalism will become vital in the history of philosophy. The Sophists. The Sophists were a group of itinerant tutors of rhetoric and teaching skills who often were hired to train young men. Women did not receive such an education. One of the primary teachings of the Sophists is that there is no universal truth. Nothing is absolutely right or wrong. In a way, they are like our modern lawyers who argue the case for their client. A good lawyer could easily switch sides and argue the case of the other side. They believed that all points of view are man-made, and rhetoric is the art of arguing any side of an issue. One of the most famous of the Sophists was Protagoras, 481 to 411 before the Common Era, who famously said, man is the measure of all things. The idea that all knowledge is man-made will become very relevant in contemporary postmodern philosophy. We will study that at the very end of the course. In other words, values are man-made, not God-given. They are relative, not universal. Socrates harshly rejected the Sophists. He believed there are universal ethics, and we can know these through rational discourse. Out of these grew the central philosophical method of Socratic dialogue. Socrates. Socrates, 470 to 399 before the Common Era, was the founder of the method of dialogue to arrive at philosophical truths. He never wrote anything. We know his views from the writings of his students Plato and Xenophon. He is also mentioned in Aristophanes' play The Clouds. Socrates was put to death by the citizens of Athens for impiety and corrupting the youth of the city. He was known as a gadfly, named after a kind of fly that would sting a horse and cause it to react. In the same way, he would confront the citizens of Athens with questions challenging their views. For example, he would ask, "What is justice?" Someone would reply that justice is giving everyone their due. Socrates would say, "Does that mean that it is justice if someone borrows an object to return it to them?" And the person would reply, "Of course." Then Socrates would challenge them. "If someone borrows a weapon and the owner wants it back to kill an innocent person, justice means you give it back?" The person would reply, "Of course not," challenging this definition of justice. This is actually in Plato's dialogue, The Republic. Socrates was not looking for absolute answers, but challenging people's ideas about justice, piety, or other virtues. According to Plato's dialogue, The Apology, Socrates' friend asked the oracle of Delphi to tell him who was the wisest man alive. The oracle answered that Socrates was the wisest. When Socrates heard this, he said, "Impossible." He did not know anything. Therefore, he would confront others looking for someone who was wise. In the end, Socrates concluded that others think they are wise but do not know anything. He, Socrates, does not know anything and knows it. He knows he does not know anything. So he is wiser than the others. Socrates strongly disagreed with the Sophists, who taught that all truth is relative. He believed there must be absolute truths which can be found through Socratic dialogues. He also disagreed with the Sophists for taking money in their search for knowledge. For Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. Regarding ethics, he taught that knowledge leads to virtue. If we know the right thing, we will do the right thing. Western philosophy is built on the opinions of Socrates' great student Plato and Plato's great student Aristotle. Nonetheless, Plato and Aristotle fundamentally disagreed. Philosophers will continue to argue about this disagreement until our very day.